All right. Hello, hello, welcome, and good morning, everyone. Mr. Ocampo here with another read. Sorry we did not have one last week. It was a little bit of a hectic thing for my stream schedule, but we're back at it again today with Chapter 9. We're in week 7, kids. More than halfway than a 2 hour quarter. So I really hope that you are, you know, enjoying the story so far. For those of you who tune into the live reads, thank you so much for being here. And if you are watching the replay, I'm glad that you took the time out to check it out. Let's check out chapter 9. We only have one chapter that we're reading this week because of the day off from President's Day. Um, yeah, it's just chapter 9, which is actually a pretty big chapter. So we're going to break this down as best as we can. All right, let's begin. Chapter 9. For the first time in 3 nights, Okonko slept. He woke up once in the middle of the night and his mind went back to the past 3 days without making him feel uneasy. He began to wonder why he had felt uneasy at all. It was like a man wondering in broad daylight why a dream had appeared so terrible to him at night. He stretched himself and scratched his thigh where a mosquito had bitten him as he slept. Another one was wailing near his right ear. He slapped the ear and hoped he had killed it. Why do they always go for one's ears? When he was a child, his mother had told him a story about it, but it was as silly as all women's stories. Mosquito, she said, had asked Ear to marry him, whereupon Ear fell on the floor in uncontrollable laughter. How much longer do you think you will live? She asked. You are already a skeleton. Mosquito went away humiliated, and any time he passed her way, he told Ear that he was still alive. Well, it's a neat little wives' tale, and it's a woman's tale. So of course Okonkwo doesn't respect it. So remember, in previous chapters, Okonkwo has killed Ikemefuna in chapter 7, and he was dealing with his depression in chapter 8. And it looks like, a few days later, 3 days later to be precise, he's actually feeling pretty okay with himself. So, maybe not much has changed. I don't know. We'll see what happens in this chapter. I don't exactly know. I don't exactly know what's going to happen in this chapter. All right. Okonkwo turned on his side and went back to sleep. He was roused in the morning by someone banging on his door. Who is that? He growled. He knew it must be Akwefi. Of his 3 wives, Akwefi was the only one who would have the audacity to bang on his door. Azinma is dying, came her voice, and all the tragedy and sorrow of her life were packed in those words. Okay, Azinma's dying. Okonkwo sprang from his bed, pushed back the bolt on his door, and ran into Akwefi's hut. Azinma lay shivering on a mat beside a huge fire that her mother had kept burning all night. It is Iba, said Okonkwo, as he took his machete and went into the bush to collect the leaves and grasses and barks of trees that went into making the medicine for Iba. Okay, so I guess Okonkwo knows that Azinma is sick with something, and he knows the cure for it, so he's going to gather the cure. Akwefi knelt beside the sick child, occasionally feeling with her palm the wet, burning forehead. Yeah, sounds like a fever. Azima was an only child and the center of her mother's world. Very often, it was Azima who decided what food her mother should prepare. Akwefi even gave her such delicacies as eggs. Why is eggs a delicacy? Which children were rarely allowed to eat because such food tempted them to steal. What? I wonder if it's because, in order to get eggs, you have to essentially steal, a chicken's children. I don't know. Okonkwo had come in unexpectedly from his hut. He was greatly shocked and swore to beat Akwefi if she dared to give the child eggs again. But it was impossible to refuse Azinma anything. After her father's rebuke, she developed an even keener appetite for eggs, and she enjoyed above all the secrecy in which she now ate them. Her mother always took her into their bedroom and shut the door. Azima did not call her mother Enne with like all. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. Enne, like all other children. She called her by her name, Akwefi, as her father and other grown-up people did. The relationship between them was not only that of mother and child, there was something in it like the companionship of equals, which was strengthened by such little conspiracies as eating eggs in the bedroom. Akwefi had suffered a good deal in her life. Oh, we have a guest. Welcome. How's it going, Miss Hanson Robles? Oh, I'll turn up the volume. Sure. Let me know if this works. All right. The naming ceremony. Okay. Where was I? Here we go. Akwefi had suffered a good deal in her life. She had borne 10 children, and 9 of them had died in infancy, usually before the age of 3. As she buried one child after another, her sorrow gave way to despair and then grim resignation. The birth of her children, which should be a woman's crowning glory, became for Akwefi mere physical agony devoid of promise. The naming ceremony after 7 market weeks became an empty ritual. Her deepening despair found expression in the names she gave her children. One of them was a pathetic cry, Onwumbiko, death I implore you. But death took no notice. Onwumbiko died in his 15th month. The next child was a girl, Ozoemena. May it not happen again. She died in her 11th month, and 2 others after her. Akwefi then became defiant and called her next child Onwuma. May death please himself. And he did. That's 5 kids. All right, hold up. Okay. So let me add a slide here because it seems like we read quite a bit. Okay. So let's sum up a little bit of what we learned. Okonkwo's state of mind. He is back to feeling normal. He still sees women's tales as nonsense, and then i.e. the tale of ear and mosquito. That's really it. We actually don't know too much. Akwefi. She comes to Okonkwo, the dead of night. Ezima is dying. She is the only wife who is brave enough to bang on his door. So he already knows, oh my god, this person who is banging on my door, it's Akwefi. Because she's the only one who's ballsy enough to bang on my door. Her struggles in the past. Basically, she has problems bearing kids. So all of her kids, so she had 5 miscarriages as far as I'm counting. 5, oh wait, no, not 5 miscarriages, 5 like deaths. 5 infancy deaths. And they were all named in spite of death. Like, death, I implore you, may it not happen again. Death may please himself. Like, that's messed up. Like when you're so like resigned to it that you name your kids after, like, you know, things that you say to death, that's pretty sad. I mean, like, you're supposed to be happy when you have a kid, right? It's supposed to be a blessing. But for her to lose 5 kids in a row in their infancy, that's pretty messed up. Like, that is a total of, let's see, 9 times 5, 45 months. That's like 3.5, no, almost almost 4 years that you're pregnant and giving birth to these children and they all die. Like that's not cool. After the death of Akwefi's second child, Okonkwo had gone to a medicine man who was also a diviner of the Afa Oracle to inquire what was amiss. The man told him that the child was an Ogbanje, one of those wicked children who, when they died, entered their mother's wombs to be born again. Okay. Ogbanje. That's a term. Wicked children who, on death, enter mother's womb, born again. Okay, that's interesting. So maybe it's not 5 separate kids that died. It's one Ogbanje that just keeps going back into the womb to be born again and then dies again. When your wife becomes pregnant again, he said, let her not sleep in her hut. Let her go and stay with her people. In that way, she will elude her wicked tormentor and break its evil cycle of birth and death. Akwefi did as she asked. As soon as she became pregnant, she went to live with her old mother in another village. It was there that her third child was born and circumcised on the 8th day. She did not return to Okonkwo's compound until 3 days before the naming ceremony. The child was called Onwumbiko. Onwumbiko was not given a proper burial when he died. Okonkwo had called in another medicine man who was famous in the clan for his great knowledge about Ogbanje children. His name was Okagbue Oyanwa. Okagbue was a very striking figure, tall, with a full beard and a bald head. It's like a medicine man or like a wise guy. That's cool. He was light in complexion and his eyes were red and fiery. He always gnashed his teeth as he listened to those who came to consult him. He asked Okonkwo a few questions about the dead child. All the neighbors and relations who had come to mourn gathered round them. On what market day was it born? He asked. Oye, replied Okonkwo. And it died this morning? Okonkwo said yes, and only then realized for the first time that the child had died on the same market day as it had been born. The neighbors and relations also saw the coincidence and said among themselves that it was very significant. Where do you sleep with your wife? In your obi or in her own hut? Asked the medicine man. In her hut. In the future, call her into your obi. The medicine man then ordered that there should be no mourning for the dead child. He brought out a sharp razor from the goatskin bag slung from his left shoulder and began to mutilate the child. Okay. So, this is what is this guy called? This is the third child. You know what? I'm just going to say one of the kids. It's not that important to know. So, one of the dead infants. Mutilated before throwing it into evil forest. I'm going to rename this Akwefi's Dead Children Problem. Then he took it away to bury in the evil forest, holding it by the ankle and dragging it on the ground behind him. After such treatment, it would think twice before coming again. Because it's Ogbanje, so, after it dies, it goes back into the womb. So if they, mutilate the child and drag it through the dirt and throw it in the evil forest, the Ogbanje will be like, nah, I'm not going to come back. Unless it was one of the stubborn ones who returned, carrying the stamp of their mutilation, a missing finger, perhaps a dark line where the medicine man's razor had cut them. By the time Onwumbiko died, Akwefi had become a very bitter woman. Her husband's first wife had already 3 sons, all strong and healthy. When she had borne her third son in succession, Okonkwo had slaughtered a goat for her, as was the custom. Akwefi had nothing but good wishes for her, but she had grown so bitter about her own chi that she could not rejoice with others over their good fortune, and so On the day that Nwoye's mother celebrated the birth of her 3 sons with feasting and music, Ekwefi was the only person in the happy company who went about with a cloud on her brow. Her husband's wife took this for malevolence, as husbands' wives were wont to. How could she know that Ekwefi's bitterness did not flow outwards to others, but inwards into her own soul, that she did not blame others for their good fortune, but her own evil chi, who denied her any? Oh, that's interesting. So, it's not that she hates Okonkwo's other wives for being able to bear good, healthy children. It's more that she hates herself for not being able to bear healthy children. But that negativity is misperceived by the other wives. It's misperceived as like, oh, you must hate us. That's why you're not having fun, right? It's like, no, I'm not having fun because I suck as an individual. That's how Ekwefi is feeling. I don't know if anyone's felt like that before and has been misinterpreted that, become a sourpuss in front of others, but it's not because you're upset with them, it's because you're upset with yourself for some reason. That's happened to me a couple times. I've learned to keep my emotions in check at that point. At last, Azima was born, and although ailing, she seemed determined to live. At first, Ekwefi accepted her. So I'm going to put here, Ekwefi became very bitter. All right, and I think it's time for a new slide. The birth of Azima. Although ailing, she seemed determined to live. At first, Ekwefi accepted her, as she had accepted others, with listless resignation. That sucks. It's like you're so used to this that you just kind of accept that if this child dies, she dies. But when she lived on to her 4th, 5th, and 6th years, love returned once more to her mother, and with love, anxiety. She determined to nurse her child to health, and she put all her being into it. She was rewarded by occasional spells of health during which Azima bubbled with energy like fresh palm wine. At such times, she seemed beyond danger, but all of a sudden she would go down again. Everybody knew she was an Ogbanje. Okay. Born sick, and everyone knowing she is an Ogbanje. Ekwefi resists at first, but learns to love her and tries her best to nurture. Neat. These sudden bouts of sickness and health were typical of her kind, but she had lived so long that perhaps she had decided to stay. Some of them did become tired of their evil rounds of birth and death, or took pity on their mothers and stayed. Ekwefi believed deep inside her that Azima had come to stay. She believed that it was that faith alone that gave her her own life any kind of meaning. And this faith had been strengthened when a year or so ago a medicine man had dug up Azima's Iyi Uwa. Everyone knew then that she would live because her bond with the world of Ogbanje had been broken. Ekwefi was reassured, but such was her anxiety for her daughter that she could not rid herself completely of her fear. And although she believed that the Iyi Uwa which had been dug up was genuine, she could not ignore the fact that some really evil children sometimes misled people into digging up a specious one. What the heck is an Iyi Uwa? Iyi Uwa was dug up and broken, I think. But Azima's Iyi Uwa had looked real enough. It was a smooth pebble wrapped in a dirty rag. The man who dug it up was the same Okagbue who is famous in all the clan for his knowledge in these matters. Azima had not wanted to cooperate with him at first, but that was only to be expected. No Ogbanje would yield her secrets easily, and most of them never did because they died too young, before they could be asked questions. "Where did you bury your Iyi Uwa?" Okagbue had asked Azima. She was 9 then, and was just recovering from a serious illness. "What is Iyi Uwa?" she asked in return. "You know what it is. You buried it in the ground somewhere, so that you can die and return again to torment your brother." Okay. So it sounds like it's like a talisman or like magic object that allows an Ogbanje to die and get reborn. So if you break that cycle, then they can't be reborn again. They just have to stay alive. I think that's the goal here. I'm going to put it like that. That makes sense. Azima looked at her mother, whose eyes, sad and pleading, were fixed on her. Answer the question at once, roared Okonkwo, who stood beside her. All the family were there, and some of the neighbors too. Leave her to me, the medicine man told Okonkwo in a cool, confident voice. Oh, hold on, it's a little loud here. Give me a second. I hope that helped. Sorry, they're mowing the grass outside. I live in a place where grass actually grows, so you know, every week or so I have to listen to the sound of a lawnmower. Anyways, that's no problem. Leave her to me, the medicine man told Okonkwo in a cool, confident voice. He turned again to Azima. Where did you bury your Igiua? Where they buried children, she replied, and the quiet spectators murmured to themselves. Come along then and show me the spot, said the medicine man. The crowd set out with Azima leading the way, and Okagbue followed closely behind her. Okonkwo came next, and Akwefi followed him. When she came to the main road, Azima turned left as if she were going to the stream. But you said it was where they buried children, asked the medicine man. No, said Azima, whose feeling of importance was manifest in her sprightly walk. She sometimes broke into a run and stopped again suddenly. The crowd followed her silently. Women and children returning from the stream with pots of water on their heads wondered what was happening, until they saw Okagbue and guessed there must be something to do with the Obanje. And they all knew Akwefi and her daughter very well. Okay, so Azima is pretty well known throughout the village, and now she's leading them on a mission to find this Iyiua, some sort of magic object that kind of keeps her tethered to this cycle of birth and death. When she got to the big Udala tree, Azima turned left into the bush, and the crowd followed her. Because of her size, she made her way through trees and creepers more quickly than her followers. The bush was alive with the tread of feet on dry leaves and sticks and the moving aside of tree branches. Azima went deeper and deeper, and the crowd went with her. Then she suddenly turned around and began to walk back to the road. Everybody stood to let her pass and filed after her. She's got the entire village following her. She must be like this small like 5-year-old leading these people around. If you bring us all this way for nothing, I shall beat sense into you, Okonkwo threatened. I have told you to let her alone. I know how to deal with them, said Okagbue. Azima led the way back to the road, looked left and right, and turned right. And so they arrived home again. So she brought them all around, through like the bush, where she can get through easily, and her followers can't. And she brought them all the way back to her home. It is near the orange tree, said Azima. And why did you not say so, you wicked daughter of Akalogoli? Okonkwo swore furiously. The medicine man ignored him. Come and show me the exact spot, he said quietly to Azima. It is here, she said, when they got to the tree. Point at the spot with your finger, said Okagbue. It is here, said Azima, touching the ground with her finger. Okonkwo stood by, rumbling like thunder in the rainy season. Okonkwo was just pissed. You know, his daughter just led the entire village on a wild goose chase all around until they got back to where they started, next to an orange tree. Bring me a hoe, said Okagbue. When Akwefi brought the hoe, he had already put aside his goatskin bag and his big cloth, and was in his underwear, a long and thin strip of cloth wound around the waist like a belt, and then passed between the legs to be fastened to the belt behind. He immediately set to work, digging a pit where Azima had indicated. The neighbors sat around, watching the pit becoming deeper and deeper. The dark topsoil soon gave way to the bright red earth, with which women scrubbed the floors and walls of huts. Okagbue worked tirelessly and in silence, his back shining with perspiration. Okonkwo stood by the pit. He asked Okagwe to come up and rest while he took a hand, but Okagwe said he was not tired yet. Okwefi went into her hut to cook yams. Her husband had brought out more yams than usual because the medicine man had to be fed. Azima went with her and helped in preparing the vegetables. "There's too much green vegetable," she said. "Don't you see this pot is full of yams?" Okwefi asked. "And you know how leaves become smaller after cooking?" "Yes," said Azima. "That's why the snake lizard killed his mother." "Very true," said Okwefi. "He gave his mother 7 baskets of vegetables to cook, and in the end there were only 3, and so he killed her," said Azima. "That is not the end of the story." "Oh-ho," said Azima. "I remember now. He brought another 7 baskets and cooked them himself. And there were again only 3, so he killed himself too." What in the world? Okay, that's an interesting little story. So, hold on, let me add this. Azima leads the village a wild search for the Iyi-Uwa. Outside the Obi, Okagwe and Okonkwo were digging the pit to find where Azima had buried her Iyi-Uwa. Neighbors sat around watching. The pit was now so deep that they no longer saw the digger. They only saw the red earth. He threw up, mounting higher and higher. Okonkwo's son Nwoye stood near the edge of the pit because he wanted to take in all that happened. Okagwe had again taken over the digging from Okonkwo. He worked as usual in silence. The neighbors and Okonkwo's wives were now talking. The children had lost interest and were playing. Suddenly, Okagwe sprang to the surface with the agility of a leopard. "It is very near now," he said. "I have felt it." There was immediate excitement, and those who were sitting jumped to their feet. "Call your wife and child," he said to Okonkwo, but Okwefi and Azima had heard the noise and ran out to see what it was. Okagwe went back into the pit, which was now surrounded by spectators. After a few more hopefuls of earth, he struck the Iyi-Uwa. He raised it carefully with the hoe and threw it to the surface. Some women ran away in fear when it was thrown. So he picks up the thing with the tool and he lifts it up out of the dirt. That's cool. Some women ran away in fear when it was thrown, but they soon returned and everyone was gazing at the rag from a reasonable distance. Okagwe emerged and without saying a word or even looking at the spectators, he went to his goatskin bag, took out 2 leaves and began to chew them. When he had swallowed them, he took up the rag with his left hand and began to untie it, and then the smooth, shiny pebble fell out. He picked it up. "Is this yours?" he asked Azima. "Yes," she replied. All the women shouted with joy because Okwefi's troubles were at last ended. So they dig at least 6 feet or something like that because, you couldn't see the diggers. That's how far they had went. And this medicine man finds a rag, and inside that rag, a very smooth and shiny pebble. And I guess that is the Iyi-Uwa, Azima's Iyi-Uwa. And he does something with leaves. I guess that gives him protection or something like that. But he finds the Iyi-Uwa. All this had happened more than a year ago, and Azima had not been ill since. And then suddenly she had begun to shiver in the night. Okwefi brought her to the fireplace, spread her mat on the floor, and built a fire. But she had got worse and worse. As she knelt by her, feeling her with her palm the wet burning forehead, she prayed 1,000 times. Although her husband's wives were saying that it was nothing more than Iba, she did not hear them. I mean, if you had lost 5 kids before, and this was your miracle child, and she became sick all of a sudden, I would get freaked out too. Okagwe returned from the bush, carrying on his left shoulder. So we're back. We are back to the present. We're back to the present. Azima's story was all a flashback. Now we're back to the present. Okonkwo was gathering medicine for the Iba, which I'm pretty sure is just fever. So let's put that here. In present, Azima is sick with Iba, perhaps fever. COVID, I don't know. So Okonkwo, I don't like that. So let's put bullets. Okonkwo goes out to collect medicine. So he's got grasses and leaves, roots and barks of medicinal trees and shrubs. He went to Akwefi's hut, put down his load, and sat down. "Get me a pot," he said, "and leave the child alone." Akwefi went to bring the pot, and Okonkwo selected the best from his bundle, in their due proportions, and cut them up. He put them in the pot, and Akwefi poured in some water. "Is that enough?" she asked, when she had poured in about half of the water in the bowl. "A little more." "I said a little, are you deaf?" Okonkwo roared at her. She set the pot on the fire, and Okonkwo took up his machete to return to his obi. "You must watch the pot carefully," he said as he went, "and don't allow it to boil over. If it does, its power will be gone." He went away to his hut, and Akwefi began to tend the medicine pot almost as if it was itself a sick child. Her eyes went constantly from Azima to the boiling pot and back to Azima. Okonkwo returned when he felt the medicine had cooked long enough. He looked it over and said it was done. "Bring me a low stool for Azima," he said, "and a thick mat." He took down the pot from the fire and placed it in front of the stool. He then roused Azima and placed her on the stool, astride the steaming pot. The thick mat was thrown over both. Azima struggled to escape from the choking and overpowering steam, but she was held down. She started to cry. When the mat was at last removed, she was drenched in perspiration. Akwefi mopped her with a piece of cloth, and she lay down on the mat and was soon asleep. Oh, okay. So Okonkwo boils this like medicinal tea, and makes Azima breathe the fumes, the steam. So this sounds like, I don't know if any of you have experienced this before, but my parents, when I was young, how many of you have used Vicks Vapor Rub before to take care of, your coughing, your congestion, anytime you're sick? Vicks Vapor Rub would be rubbed on your chest or under your nose. And that, or you just sniff the Vicks Vapor Rub and it would make you feel better. So sounds like he made Vicks Vapor Rub. My parents would actually do this thing where they, just like Okonkwo did, they boiled a pot of water to the point where it's steaming, and they take a spoonful of Vicks Vapor Rub, and then they dropped it in the boiling water and they mixed it. That way, the steam that came up was all just Vicks Vapor Rub, and then they would tell me to put my head, not like in the water, but above the pot, and then they would throw a towel over me in the pot, and they would have me breathe it in. And one, I would start sweating like crazy because it's boiling water, it's really hot, and two, the vapor rub would actually infuse itself in my nostrils and my mouth and get into my throat, because that's all I'm breathing in, and it would work its effect. So this sounds exactly like that, except with natural herbs and roots and stuff. So Okonkwo, he tries really hard to it's not just Akwefi who cares about Azima. Remember, Okonkwo really adores Azima. He doesn't show his affection outward, he doesn't say to Azima, "Oh, I love you. You are my dearest child," or whatever. But he did wake up in the middle of the night and try his hardest to make this medicine for her. And this is 3 days after, Ikemefuna is killed. We see one side of Okonkwo as this really strict, really insecure dude who can't stand the thought of him being seen as weak. And then on the other hand, we see him caring for his daughter. He's very rough around the edges with his wife. He yells at her. He makes sure that everything's precise, and he gets pissed off when she doesn't do it right. But at the end of the day, Okonkwo is taking care of his daughter. And I don't know about you, but that's a pretty nice fatherly thing for him to do. So I don't know where you all stand in your judgment of Okonkwo by the end of this chapter, but it seems like, he seems like a human being to me. He has his flaws, but he also has his strengths, and maybe his passion for his children matches his passion for being seen as weak. But that's chapter 9, and that was a pretty long chapter where we learn a lot about Akwefi and her child rearing problems, and Azima and her early, struggles with staying alive, and this idea of her being an Ogbanje. We learn a lot about the Igbo culture and how they believe. They put this belief about children and, like the spirit of birth and death. And then we learn about Okonkwo, who is not as bad of a father as some of us might believe. So that's chapter 10, or chapter 9. We're going to read chapter 10 next week. I hope that you enjoyed this chapter. And we are going to keep reading and learning about the Igbo culture in Okonkwo. And this was a cool little insight into his relationship with his wife and daughter. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here. I hope that you enjoy these live reads, and I look forward to doing them for you. Sorry that I missed out last week, but we'll catch up. I'm looking forward to doing another one on Friday for you for chapter 10, because that's what we'll be reading next week. So tune in on Friday, 1:30 p.m. That one should go as planned. If not, I'll make sure that you see an announcement. So make sure that you're checking your announcements regularly. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel so that you can get notifications for when I go live. All right. You all have a great Wednesday, and I will see you in class as we discuss chapter 9 of Things Fall Apart. Take care and have a great day.